Hi everyone, Sam Dever, the Social Media Show, here again at Author 101 University, and I am here with a very special guest, Mitch Axelrod. Mitch, welcome.
Great to be with you, Sam.
Mitch is the author of The New Game of Business and has another book actually coming out next week, The New Game of Selling. So, Mitch, that's a little bit about what you do. For the people that may not have heard of you, who are you and what do you do?
Okay, I grew up in a little town called Brooklyn, New York.
I think I've heard of
You
that.
heard of that, right? I'm the
Yeah.
youngest of 8 kids, yours, mine, and ours. My dad was a New York City cop, and I'm the only entrepreneur in the family. And I have been what I call psychologically unemployable. Next Thursday, October 31st, Halloween will be 35 consecutive years.
I love that. Yeah, I absolutely love that.
I am like, I am psychologically unemployable. That's 75,000 hours consecutively, where I have had to literally make my living being in business. And I've had some ups and I've had some downs and I've had some sideways, and you know, it's like you climb the mountain, you come down the other side, then you climb up and you come down the other side. You know, so it's been quite a journey.
No, I love your mind frame perspective, and that's so unique that you've never had to have a job after school, because usually the mind frame, me being about 4 years removed now, I know that senior year, their resumes and, you know, now going to Career Builder and got to get that security, whereas with you, you've had that mind frame, I'm going to provide for myself and I'm going, you know, to fight to make my own way. So that's remarkable. I love that.
Well, I tell you, truly, Sam, I encourage everybody to embrace that mindset, that even if you work for someone else, it really pays to think of yourself as self-employed. Because the way the world is today, as you know, very little job security. And so if you think of yourself as self-employed and you start to position yourself that way, if and when the time comes that you need to be self-employed, you're going to be much more prepared for that.
Right.
And so it really pays to learn beyond the little narrow scope of what your daily tasks are. It pays to start to learn about how do I become more self-reliant, and at the same time, how do I become more interdependent? Because today, you can't do it by yourself. I'm in business 35 years. I could never have done it by myself. So you need to build a team of people around you. And a lot of that now, ironically, is in the social media space, because people start emerging that you didn't know you couldn't connect with, and now you can connect with them. So I always tell people, look, you know, try to build yourself a team and try to be a really good team player.
Right.
So I always try to make the players around me better. And I come from a sports background. I'm a baseball player. I tried with the St. Louis Cardinals at the time.
Who are doing pretty good right now.
We're doing pretty good right now, you know.
Right.
I see him whip the Red Sox because I'm a Yankee fan. And so if you look at your team, a lot of people are very kind of isolated, and they don't have people to rely on. And so one of the keys to being in business is you've got to be interdependent. You've got to build a team of people. And so I've spent a lot of time building relationships over the years, and it's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when you need to make a friend. It's too late to make a friend when you need a friend.
Right.
So it's
That's
really
a true
important
statement.
to build your relationships, never burn bridges, and always try to do good things for other people.
Absolutely, and that leads into my next question, because you and I had a really interesting social media conversation beforehand. You have kind of a different take on social media. You know, now everyone's all about it. Social media, we're meeting people on it, we're connecting, people are doing business through it, where you kind of have a different outlook on it. And maybe explain a little more of what you do and your take on social media for your industry you're in.
Well, you got to realize too, when I started in business 35 years ago, there were basically 3 ways that you could hook up with people. You could phone them, you could mail them, or you could do the old-fashioned thing, like actually be with them.
Whoa, really? People talked in person like that?
It's like bygone days, but they actually did, and it was amazing because when you're with somebody, it's very different than when you are separated by some sort of space, whether that space is distance,
right,
a computer screen. So I started actually in social media probably back in 2006, and I started slow. I think I've been on LinkedIn since 2005, it was early in the game, right? But what I noticed was there were some very interesting developments of people who were on social media a lot. One is they started to get distracted away from the really important stuff, right? And I was just telling you the story. I was having lunch with a friend, and in mid-sentence, he got a jingled text of a Facebook post, and he literally stopped in mid-sentence and looked down, and I'm standing there like, okay, what's coming next?
Yeah.
You know? So it was almost like that thing took precedent over our conversation. And so as much as I love it, and I do love it, and I need to use it more, honestly, I'm sort of a cave dweller by nature. But I realize that sometimes social media distracts us in a way where it takes our focus away from what we're doing, and it makes it very difficult to go back to where we were. I call it pinball brain. And I have it almost every day in some way, you know, where
Right.
you're thinking about a bunch of different things. So that was one thing I noticed is that people get consumed by it, and it starts to disrupt a little bit the personal relationships when you're with people. You know, it's like you can't put your phone away for 1 hour
Right.
without being distracted. And if you really believe that the secret to business and life is relationships, you know, it's very hard to build a relationship when every 10 seconds or every 2 minutes something is going off like Pavlov's dogs, you know, the bell's ringing and we're salivating.
Yeah, right.
So I've noticed that as one of the trends as well.
And it's almost like I had a college professor. He said one of the biggest problems he knows with students is not only social media, but you know, having your iPod in, just technology in general is interpersonal communication skills. And he gave us a challenge. He said, go up to 3 random people today and just start a conversation. And you know, a lot of people can't do that anymore. And you talk about staying on social media. It's almost like we're staying busy, but we're not being productive.
Yeah.
So would you agree with that?
Yeah, and the problem is, it's almost a reactive. It is a reactive. So there's not much awareness. See, when you have awareness, you can always stop whatever you're doing, and because you're conscious, right? And consciousness is a really important part of any business. It's an important part of life. It's the core of relationship building, is to be conscious and aware of the people you're involved with and the surroundings. So think about how you feel when somebody disengages from you, or you're talking to somebody and their eyes are darting, or they're looking around you, or they're looking at the other person. And all of a sudden you feel like diminished by that.
Absolutely.
And so in addition to the lack of interpersonal skills, it's affecting our ability to advance our career. Because if we're always plugged in, we're inside. We're not paying attention to the world outside of us. So we're missing cues. I have clients who have missed opportunity to get business from people because they were distracted by a message from social media. Right? So they weren't present.
Instead of being in the moment.
In the moment, right. And so you almost can never be in the moment, because no matter how you're present, you're instantly distracted the minute that Pavlov's dog bell rings. You're distracted. And so I've seen not only the lack of interpersonal skills, but the lack of the ability to stay on a task without interruption for at least 20 to 25 minutes. And there's this thing called the Pomodoro method.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And they ring a bell. It's like 25 minutes. You have 25-minute blocks, you know, and you've got to stay focused. I'm astounded at how few people can stay centered for 25 minutes. Just think about that. Give yourselves a challenge. Just do any task and stay centered without any distraction for 25 minutes. See if you can do that. And if you can do that, then you can do it over and over again. And the more you stay focused and not distracted, then you can use social media consciously with awareness in whatever way you want. You know? And again, I'm talking in a business context.
Absolutely, and it's almost like social media is great, but we can't lose sight. There is reality, and I know sometimes I've said social media is kind of like the Matrix. I log on to Twitter and like I've just gone into a totally different world. And, Mitch, this is some great stuff. So, yeah, thank you so much for sitting and taking the time. And I know you do intellectual property, and I was wondering if you could leave us just what's your take, a little bit about what you do with intellectual property, and how is social media playing into that realm?
That's a really great question. So, intellectual property. I ask people a question: what's the most valuable real estate in the world? And people say Beverly Hills, New York, Manhattan, the south of France. And I say no. It's the 6 inches of real estate between your ears.
I love that.
And when you really think about it, we all have intellect. The problem is we don't give ourselves enough credit for it. We diminish it. We listen to other people who say it's not worth it. Every single person I've ever talked to in my life, I ask them, have you ever had a great idea? Of Of course, I've had a great idea.
Yeah.
And have you had a great idea that you saw somebody else actualize or capitalize or monetize, and everybody says, I had that idea? Well, the question is, why didn't you do something with it? And so intellectual property not only is the greatest and fastest growing capital asset, in my estimation, it's the next new game of business, because companies have about 30% more in intellectual property that's on their balance sheets. Each of us have intellectual property that we can capitalize and monetize in ways we never even thought possible. So 25 years ago, when all my colleagues were producing audio cassette programs and video cassette programs and had inventory and warehouses and paper and plastic, I was licensing my intellectual property to companies with no inventory, no overhead, 90% profit, and I wasn't selling. I was collaborating with them to figure out, how do you take this, most valuable real estate and use it? And there's a big movement now. People are saying, well, you don't want to trade time for money. But that's silly. We all trade time for money. I was once paid $10,000 for 6 minutes.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah. And I say to people, well, if you were ever paid, would you take $10,000 for would you trade 6 minutes for $10,000? I've had nobody say no.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how did you do it?
I don't even care what I have to do.
That's right. How did you do it? And when I explain how I did it, they begin to understand it had nothing to do with my products. It had nothing to do with packaging. It was, I came up with a solution that made somebody $1 million. So I came up with a solution for a client of mine. And he said, I said to him, it's going to be $10,000. And no matter how long it takes me, if it's 6 minutes, 6 hours, 6 days, or 6 months, it's $10,000. And he said, done deal, because it was $1 million at stake. He told me what it was, and in 6 minutes, I had the solution. He said, we're done. We're done. Now think about this. You should never charge by the hour. Everybody I talk to, I say, don't charge by the hour. Why? Because you actually get paid less for efficiency. Think about it. If you're getting paid by the hour and you come up with the solution in 5 minutes, why should you spend the other 55 minutes when you've come up with the solution?
Right.
But people have that hourly mentality, so they use the whole hour, and it traps you inside of an hourly rate. On the other hand, if you charge for value, it's a whole different game. And so what we do is we teach people how to use their intellect, how to release their intellect, how to throw the box away and understand all the different applications of it. And then even if they do have products, like information products, we show them how to liberate the intellectual property from the product and make more money with the 6 inches between your ears than you could ever make packaging it or productizing it. And it's an exciting game, and I predict that in the next 5 years, you're going to have intellectual property in your retirement plan.
I totally agree, and this is amazing content you're giving us today, because I think this is a topic that not a lot of people think about. And I actually met an intellectual property lawyer who is now going strictly to social media intellectual property, because now that's where people are putting their content. That's where people are putting artwork. That's where people are putting videos up. And now that there is piracy, people are taking things from that, and it's no longer like when people were downloading music back in the day. No, it's everything now. And intellectual property, I see becoming more and more important as we go on into the future here. So thank you so much for taking the time with us. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you online or get a hold of you if they want you to help them with their intellectual property?
MitchAxelrod.com is one place, and the same name for Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Mitch Axelrod, A-X-E-L-R-O-D. And then just check out The New Game. The New Game of Selling is the book we're coming out with. And what I say to people is, you can, in The New Game of Selling, you can be wildly successful being yourself. And that's the greatest feeling in the world, that when you can be wildly successful being yourself, being really authentic, not inauthentically authentic, but authentic.
Right.
People love it, and I've trained over 1 million people in The New Game of Selling, and so that's how you can get it.
I love it. Thank you so much. You're definitely an authentic guy, and we appreciate you
It's
taking
my
the
pleasure.
time. Enjoy the rest
Thank
of
you very
Author
much.
101.
I appreciate you having me.
All right. This is the Social Media Show.